Voices Untold.
That Thursday morning, I was doing laundry. Nothing special about it. Just a normal Thursday in March. Jeremy had already left for work. I was collecting clothes from the bedroom floor, the usual pile he leaves on his side of the bed. I picked up his gray suit jacket, the one he had worn to a client dinner 2 nights before. I always check pockets before I put things in the wash. It is a habit I have had my whole life. My mother drilled it into me when I was a teenager. You always check pockets, Natalie. Always. She had a story about a $20 bill that went through the wash 3 times and came out looking like confetti. She told it every time she saw me doing laundry until the day she died. You always check pockets. I reached into the inside pocket of the jacket. There was a receipt. I unfolded it. It was from Tiffany & Company. A necklace. $3,400. Purchased 6 weeks earlier. I just stood there. I stood there in our bedroom holding that receipt, and I could not move. I could not think. I could not breathe properly. I just stood there staring at those numbers. $3,400, Tiffany & Company, 6 weeks ago. Our anniversary had been 2 months before that. In November, Jeremy had given me a card and told me he forgot to organize something this year. He said it like it was nothing, easy, unbothered, like he knew I would forgive him, and I had forgiven him. Because I always forgave him. That was what I did. Someone had received a $3,400 necklace from Tiffany & Company 6 weeks ago. It was not me. I felt sick. I felt cold. My hands were shaking. I felt the floor shift under my feet. I read the receipt again, one more time, as if reading it again would change what it said. It did not change what it said. It said exactly the same thing it had said the first time. $3,400, a necklace, January. I thought about putting it back. I thought about pretending I had never seen it. I thought about folding it up and sliding it back into that pocket and carrying on with my morning like nothing had happened. Like I had not just found the thing I had been afraid of finding for months. I folded the receipt. I put it back exactly where I found it. I put the jacket in the wash anyway. I finished the laundry. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, and I stared at the wall. I sat there for a long time, a very long time. The coffee went cold in my hands. The morning light moved across the kitchen floor. I watched it move. I did not get up. I just sat there thinking about everything I had been telling myself for the past several months. Everything I had been refusing to see. Everything I had chosen not to look at directly. All the small pieces I had collected and filed away and refused to fit together into the picture they were clearly forming. The receipt had formed the picture for me. $3,400. January. Our anniversary in November, with just a card. Someone else with a Tiffany box in January. My name is Natalie Reeves. I am 36 years old. I am an interior designer in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had been married to Jeremy Reeves for 9 years, and on that Thursday morning in March, standing in our bedroom with a Tiffany receipt in my hand, I finally stopped lying to myself. I met Jeremy when I was 26 years old. It was at a networking event in Uptown Charlotte, a real estate event. I had just started my own design firm. I was there looking for contacts, developer contacts who might need residential interiors done. I almost did not go that night. I was tired. I had been working 7 days a week for 4 months trying to get the firm off the ground, and I could not see the point of standing in a room full of strangers for 2 hours eating bad canapes and exchanging business cards with people who would never call me. Dana had to talk me into it. She said, "Natalie, you cannot build a business from your apartment. Go." I went. Jeremy was a real estate developer. He was tall, dark-haired, very confident. He found me by the drinks table and handed me a glass of wine before I had even asked for one. He said, "You look like someone who knows exactly what she wants, but is too polite to ask for it." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was exactly the right thing to say to exactly the right person at exactly that moment. We talked for 3 hours that night. He was funny. He was warm. He asked about my work, and he actually listened to the answers. not the way people listen when they are waiting to talk, the way people listen when they are actually interested. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered things I said 20 minutes earlier and circled back to them. He was the most present person I had met in a long time. He called me the very next morning, 8:45. I was still in my robe with my coffee. He said, "I know this is very early, but I wanted to call before I lost my nerve." I said, "You don't seem like someone who loses his nerve." He said, "You'd be surprised." Our first date was dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Dilworth. He brought flowers, not roses, sunflowers. I had mentioned in passing the night we met that roses always felt formal to me, that they were the flower you gave someone when you could not think of what to give. He had remembered that from one passing comment in a 3-hour conversation. I still remember thinking, this person pays attention. He pays attention to the small things. And for me, a person who notices every small thing, that was everything. We dated for 2 years. I want to tell you about those 2 years because I think it matters. It matters for you to understand who he was before he became who he became. He showed up when he said he would. That sounds like a low bar, but I had dated men who did not do that, and I knew what it cost and I knew what it was worth when someone simply did what they said they would do. Jeremy showed up. Every time. He was reliable in the way that felt like love to me. He was interested in my work, genuinely interested. He would come to project sites with me sometimes on weekends just to see what I was working on. He would walk through a space I was designing and ask questions that showed he had been paying attention to everything I had told him about it. He remembered clients' names. He remembered the problems I was trying to solve. He cared about the things I cared about. He was kind to people who did not matter to him professionally, waiters, parking attendants, the woman at our dry cleaner who always got his name wrong. He was patient and warm with people who had nothing to offer him. That had always meant something to me. He proposed on a Sunday morning in our apartment. We had just made breakfast. There was no grand gesture, no elaborate plan. He just sat across from me at the kitchen table with a small box and said, "I cannot think of a single reason to wait any longer." I cried. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. I said yes, and I meant it with everything I had. We got married the following spring. Small ceremony, 60 people. A beautiful farmhouse venue outside Charlotte that I had designed the interiors for the year before. It rained in the morning and cleared by noon, and the light in the late afternoon was the most beautiful light I have ever seen at any event I have ever worked on. My grandmother Rose sat in the front row in a pale blue dress. She cried from the moment I walked in. She held my face in her hands afterward and said, "He had better deserve you." I believed he did. I really believed that. The first years were the best years of my life. I want to say that honestly. They were genuinely good. Jeremy's company was growing. My firm was growing. We bought a house in Myers Park, a 1940s colonial with original hardwood floors and high ceilings, and a back garden that had been neglected for years. I spent 8 months restoring it. Every single weekend, stripping floors and replastering walls and choosing paint colors at midnight with sample cards spread across the kitchen table. Jeremy would bring me coffee at 7 in the morning while I was still in my paint clothes. He would lean in the doorway and look at whatever room I was working on, and he would say, "You are going to make this the most beautiful house in Charlotte." And I would say, "I already have." And he would smile at me like I was the most interesting person he had ever met. That feeling. That specific feeling of being truly seen by someone. That was what I had with Jeremy in those early years. And that is the feeling that made everything that came later so much harder to understand. We traveled, Italy for our 5th anniversary, 2 weeks in Tuscany and Rome and a small fishing village near Positano that Jeremy had read about in a magazine and insisted we find. We got lost looking for it. We drove down the wrong road 3 times and eventually had to ask an old man who was sitting outside a cafe and who found us so funny that he laughed for a solid minute before pointing us in the right direction. We laughed about it for years afterward. That trip felt like proof that we were the kind of people who could get lost together and be fine about it. We had a life A real, specific, particular life with its own rhythms and habits and small rituals. Sunday mornings with coffee and the newspaper spread across the bed. Friday evenings with wine and whatever we felt like cooking. Summers where we would eat dinner outside in the garden until it got dark. Christmases at my mother's and New Year's at Dana's, and an annual trip to the beach every August that we had taken every year since our first year of marriage. I loved him. I loved him for a long time. I want you to know that. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest of this story, because it matters. It matters that I loved him. It matters that it was real. It matters that the person I'm about to describe was not always the person he turned out to be, and it matters because what I did later was not the act of a woman who had never loved the man she was married to. It was the act of a woman who had loved him completely and been completely betrayed. The change in Jeremy did not happen overnight. It never does. It was slow. So slow that I almost missed it entirely. It started in year 5. He was traveling more, working longer hours, coming home later. Not dramatically later. Just late enough that dinner was always cold. Just late enough that by the time we got into bed, we were both too tired to talk about anything that actually mattered. Just late enough that the life we had built together started to feel like a performance of a life rather than the real thing. I told myself it was growth pains. His company was expanding. He had taken on bigger projects. More travel came with that. I understood that. I had lived through my own version of it when the firm was growing. I told myself to be patient. And then I started noticing small things, very small things. He started putting his phone face down on the table. Before, it would just sit there screen up. I could always see when a message came in. Now it was always face down. Always. I noticed it the first time it happened. I told myself it was nothing. But I noticed it every time after that, too. Every single dinner. Every single time we sat down together. Face down. He started taking phone calls in the garage. Not in the living room anymore. Not in the kitchen. The garage. With the door closed. He would say, "Sorry, work call," and disappear, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes longer. I would hear the low murmur of his voice, but not the words. And when he came back in, he would be slightly different, slightly more careful, slightly more attentive in the way that people are when they are trying to overcompensate for something. He started showering the moment he came home from certain trips. Not after he had settled in, not after he had said hello properly, immediately. He would walk in the door, drop his bag, go straight to the bathroom. I would hear the water running before he had even taken off his coat sometimes. I noticed that. I filed it away. I did not say anything about it. He started being more careful about his phone at night. Before, he would leave it on the nightstand charging, and I would sometimes hear it buzz in the night, and it meant nothing to me. Now it charged across the room on silent. I noticed the first time he moved it. I did not say anything. He started working late on nights he had previously always been home. Tuesday nights had always been ours. It was a thing we had fallen into early in the marriage without ever deciding on it. Tuesday was the night we cooked together and talked properly and just existed together in our house. For years that had been true. Then one Tuesday he was late, then the next. Then the next after that. The Tuesdays just quietly disappeared and he never mentioned it, and neither did I. I noticed all of it. I noticed every single thing. I am an interior designer. I notice details for a living. I notice when a room has changed. I notice when something has been moved. I notice when something that used to be one way is now a different way. It is what I do. I cannot turn it off. But I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that successful men get busy and distracted. I told myself that this was just what happened in long marriages. I told myself that it did not mean what I was afraid it meant. I told myself that over and over, for months. My best friend Dana did not believe me. She had never fully trusted Jeremy, not from the very beginning. She had a feeling about him the first time she met him. She never said it directly. Dana is not like that. She is the kind of person who will tell you the truth, but she will wait until you are ready to hear it. She never pushed. But she would look at me sometimes with this expression and say, "Nat, you can see it too, can't you?" And I would say, "Dana, I'm fine." And she would go quiet, the way she always did when she was letting me have a lie I wasn't ready to give up yet. I was not fine. I knew I was not fine. But I kept saying it anyway, because as long as I kept saying it, I did not have to do anything about it. As long as I kept saying it, the marriage was still intact, and the life we had built was still real, and the man who had brought me sunflowers on a first date was still the man I had married. The receipt ended all of that. After I found the receipt, I said nothing to Jeremy. I know that might seem strange. A lot of women would have confronted him right away, thrown the receipt on the table and demanded answers. But I had been watching and waiting and telling myself I was wrong for months already. I needed to be certain. I needed to be completely certain before I did anything at all. I needed more than a receipt, because if I confronted him without everything and he denied it, I would be left with nothing but his denial and my suspicion, and that was worse than saying nothing. That evening, Jeremy came home and kissed me on the cheek and asked what was for dinner. I watched his face. I watched his hands. I watched the way he set his bag down and went to the fridge and opened it and stood there looking at the shelves. The way he did every single evening. I watched him move through our kitchen like a man with absolutely nothing to hide. And I thought, "You are very good at this. You have been very good at this for a long time." We had dinner together that night. I could not eat. I pushed the food around my plate and nodded when he talked and asked questions I do not remember asking. Inside, I was thinking about the receipt. I was thinking about those numbers, $3,400. I was thinking about our anniversary in November and the card without a gift. I was thinking about a woman somewhere who had received a Tiffany necklace in January while I sat across from my husband at our kitchen table, in the house I'd spent 8 months restoring. I felt sick. I felt cold. I felt something cracking open inside me that I had been keeping very tightly shut for a very long time. After dinner, Jeremy went to his office. He always went to his office after dinner. I washed the dishes. I stood at the sink listening to the water running, and I thought, I need to know who she is. I need to know everything before I do anything. I need to be so certain that there is no way for him to deny it. No way at all. I called Dana the next morning from my car. I sat in the parking lot of my studio and I called her. I told her about the receipt. There was a long silence, a very long silence. Then she said, "Nat, you already know." I said, "I know." She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to find out who she is first." She said, "And then?" I said, "And then I'm going to decide." So I started watching more closely. I started paying attention to everything, every small detail, every change, every deviation from what had been normal. I became very quiet about it, very still. On the outside, I was the same Natalie I had always been. On the inside, I was cataloging everything, building a case the way a lawyer builds a case, methodically, carefully, without showing my hand. I noticed he was shaving more often, even on days he claimed to be working from home. He had never done that before. A man who works from home does not shave at 7 in the morning. He was shaving at 7 in the morning. I noticed he had a new cologne, not his usual one, a different one, something lighter, something younger. I did not say anything. I just filed it away. I noticed he was choosing his clothes more carefully. He would stand in front of his wardrobe in the morning longer than he used to, picking things out, considering them. A man who is going to an office he has been going to for years does not stand in front of his wardrobe for 10 minutes in the morning. A man who is trying to look good for someone does. I noticed he started going to the gym more regularly, 3 times a week instead of once. He mentioned it casually, as if it was nothing, as if he had simply decided to get healthier. I said, "That's great." I smiled. I filed it away. All small things, all things I could have explained away individually. Together, they formed a picture I could no longer pretend not to see. I found out gradually, the way you piece things together when you start paying attention to everything. Her name was Kara. She was a marketing director at a commercial real estate firm in Charlotte, 32 years old. They had met at a development conference in Nashville 8 months earlier. I found her name on a conference attendee list that was in Jeremy's office. I did not snoop. I was not looking for it. I was dropping off some dry cleaning and the list was sitting on top of his desk and her name was circled in pen. Kara Ellison. Circled. Not underlined, not highlighted. Circled. The way you circle something you intend to come back to. I stood there for a long time looking at that circled name. Then I left the dry cleaning, walked out of the office, and closed the door behind me. I did not say anything to Jeremy. I did not look her up that night. I waited until the next day when I was alone in the studio and I had the time to do it properly. I found her Instagram that afternoon. It was public. Brown hair, polished, well-dressed, bright smile in every photo. The kind of person who makes everything look curated and effortless. Every dinner looked beautiful. Every trip looked perfect. Every occasion looked like something worth documenting. She was 32 years old and she looked like someone whose life was full of good things happening to her. I scrolled back, months back. I went through every photo carefully. I was looking for something specific. I did not know what. I would know it when I found it. In January, she had posted a photo of a Tiffany box on her kitchen counter. The box was pale blue with a white ribbon. The caption said, "Someone knows me well." No tag, no name. No indication of who the someone was. Just the box and the caption and the careful absence of any identifying information. I sat with my phone in my hands, staring at that photo for a long time. I felt sick. I felt cold. I felt something drop completely out of the bottom of my stomach, and underneath all of that, I felt something else. Something very quiet, very still. Like a decision being made somewhere deep inside me that my brain had not caught up with yet. I kept scrolling. I wanted to see all of it. I needed to see all of it. There were photos from Nashville in October, a conference dinner at a rooftop restaurant, a cocktail party at a hotel bar. No Jeremy visible anywhere. But I recognized the hotel in the background of one of the photos. I recognized the lobby, the specific marble, the lighting fixtures. It was the same hotel Jeremy had stayed at in Nashville in October. I knew because I had found the hotel confirmation in our shared email account at the time and thought nothing of it. I thought nothing of it then. I thought a great deal of it now. There were photos in November, December, January, the Tiffany box, February, a Valentine's Day post, a table set for two in what looked like a very good restaurant, candles, wine. The caption said, "Some evenings are just right." No tag, no name. Just the careful language of someone who is hiding something in plain sight and trusting that no one is looking closely enough to see it. Someone was looking closely enough. I knew now. I knew exactly who she was. I knew how long it had been going on. I knew about the necklace. I knew about Nashville. I knew about Valentine's Day. I knew about the Tuesdays. I sat at my desk in my studio after everyone had left for the day, and I sat with all of that knowledge, and I thought about what to do with it. I could confront him that night. I could put it all on the table and watch him try to explain it away. But I had been waiting for months already. I could wait a little longer. I could wait until I had one more thing, one definitive thing, one thing that made the whole picture so clear and so complete that there was no possible way to deny any of it. I did not have to wait long. On a Tuesday morning in April, I was going through our shared email account. We had shared it for years. Bills, subscriptions, travel confirmations, normal things. I scrolled through it most mornings without really reading anything. It was mostly receipts and newsletter subscriptions and notifications from our bank. That morning, I stopped scrolling. There was a booking confirmation from the Royal Meridian Miami, a suite on the 14th floor. Check-in April 28th. Check-out May 3rd. 5 nights. The name on the reservation was Jeremy Reeves. April 28th is our wedding anniversary. I put my coffee cup down very carefully. I read the confirmation again. Then I read it a third time. As if reading it a third time would make it say something different. It did not say anything different. It said exactly what it had said the first time. The Royal Meridian Miami, a suite, 5 nights, our anniversary week, his name. Jeremy had told me 2 weeks earlier that he had a work conference in Dallas that week. He had shown me the calendar invite. He had sent me the hotel information. He had complained about the timing. He had said, "I know it's our anniversary week. I'm sorry." I had said, "Don't worry about it." There was no conference in Dallas. He had used our shared email account by accident. Or maybe he had gotten careless. 8 months of getting away with something will do that to a person. They start to believe they are untouchable. They stop double-checking the small things. They send a booking confirmation to the account they share with their wife because they have done it 100 times before for legitimate trips, and their hands just went to the same place out of habit. I felt my hands go cold. I felt my heart pounding. I felt everything I had been holding together for months start to give way. But underneath all of that, something else was happening. Something I had not expected. I started thinking about the Royal Meridian Miami. I started thinking about what I knew about that hotel, what I knew about it that Jeremy had absolutely no idea I knew. 3 years ago, my grandmother Rose died and left me $280,000. 6 months after that, I invested $250,000 of it into a boutique hotel group called the Meridian Collection, 8 properties across the United States. I had been watching them for 2 years before I invested. I had stayed in their properties for work. I had attended 2 ownership board meetings. I had a direct relationship with every general manager in their portfolio. The Royal Meridian Miami was one of their properties. My husband had booked a 5-night anniversary suite at a hotel I partly owned to take another woman on our anniversary, using an email account we shared. I sat at that kitchen table and I felt something move through me that I cannot fully describe, like the universe had arranged something so precise, so perfectly specific that all I could do was sit there and feel the shape of it. Like something had been building toward this moment for 3 years without my knowing it. Like Rose had known somehow. Like those sunflowers on a first date and a proposal over breakfast and 8 months of restoring a house and $250,000 quietly invested in a hotel group had all been moving toward this one specific Tuesday morning in April. I called Dana. I read her the email. I told her about the hotel. I told her everything. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "Natalie Reeves, he has absolutely no idea." I said, "Not a single clue." She laughed. The specific laugh of someone watching something extraordinary happen to a person they love. Then she said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I am going to think about it for 2 days, and then I am going to make a phone call." Before I tell you about the phone call, I need to tell you about Rose. Rose was my mother's mother. She was 81 years old when she died. She'd been a bookkeeper for the same accounting firm for 40 years. She lived in the same house for 50 years. She drove the same car for 12 years. She wore the same coat every winter until it fell apart, and then she bought a new one exactly like it. She was not a person of excess. She was not a person of grand gestures or elaborate plans. She was a person of quiet, steady, consistent action. She did the same things the same way every day, and she saved everything she earned that she did not need to spend, and at the end of her life she had $280,000 in savings, and a small house paid off completely, and a garden full of roses she had tended for 30 years. She left the money to me, not to my mother, not to Jeremy and me, to me, specifically to me. The will was very clear about that. My attorney Sarah had read it twice just to be certain. To my granddaughter Natalie for her alone, to do with as she sees fit. I remember asking my mother what she thought Rose had meant by that. My mother said, "Rose always thought you needed a safety net more than you needed a partner. She never said it to your face, but she thought it." I had been watching the Meridian Collection for 2 years before Rose died. I had stayed in their properties for work trips. I had noticed how well they were run. Beautiful design, consistent service, boutique scale that allowed for genuine attention to every guest. They were expanding, and they were looking for smaller investors to join the ownership board. The minimum investment was $200,000. I had nothing close to that at the time. And then Rose died and left me $280,000, and I thought, This is what that money is for. I invested. I joined the board. I attended meetings twice a year. I met the general managers at their annual conference. Victor Webb ran the Royal Meridian Miami. He was thorough, careful, and very good at his job. I had met him twice and spoken with him several times on board calls. I never told Jeremy. Not because I was hiding it exactly, more because it was mine. Rose left it to me. Not to us, to me. And somewhere in the back of my mind, in a place I did not examine too closely at the time, I think I already understood that having something completely my own mattered. Something in my name only. Something he did not know about. Something beyond the reach of whatever came next. I did not know what came next would be this, but some part of me knew that something would. And when the email arrived on that Tuesday morning in April, I understood that Rose had been right about everything. I gave myself 2 days before I called Victor Webb. I spent those 2 days being very careful and very calm. I met with Sarah on the first day. She is my attorney. I had used her for business contracts before. She is the kind of person you want on your side when things get difficult. She listens carefully. She asks the right questions. She does not miss anything. I told her I was considering filing for divorce. I told her I needed to understand my financial position before I did anything else. She listened carefully. She asked about the investment. She said, "And he has absolutely no knowledge of this asset." I said, "None whatsoever." She said, "Good. Keep it that way until we file. Do not tell him. Do not hint at it." Nothing. She also explained what I could legally do with the accounts. My salary had been going into the joint account for 9 years. My savings were there. She told me exactly what was mine, what I was entitled to move, and how to do it in a way that was completely above reproach. I listened to every word. I wrote everything down. On the second evening, I sat in my studio after everyone had gone home. The light was going golden through the windows. My design boards were spread across the table. The studio was quiet in the way it gets when everyone has left and the building settles into itself. I found Victor Webb's number in my phone. I sat with it for a moment, and then I dialed. He answered on the second ring. I said, "Victor, this is Natalie Reeves from the ownership board. I need to speak with you about a reservation at your property." He was warm and professional, and he listened carefully while I explained the situation. When I finished, there was a pause. He said, "Ms. Reeves, I want to make sure I understand the situation fully." He asked a few careful questions. I answered all of them. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Here is what I can do." He told me everything, every detail of what would happen, how it would be handled. I listened to every word. When he finished, I said, "That is exactly right." He said, "Consider it done." Then he said, "Ms. Reeves, I am sorry this is happening to you." I said, "Don't be." I'm not, and I meant it. For the first time in months, I actually meant what I was saying. The 2 weeks between that phone call and April 28th were the strangest 2 weeks of my life. On the outside, everything looked completely normal. Jeremy came home for dinner every night. We talked about our days. We watched television on the sofa. We went to bed at the same time. He was actually a little more attentive than usual during those 2 weeks, a little more present, asking how my day had been, bringing me coffee in the morning before I asked, suggesting we do things together, the way people get when they are managing a guilty conscience, without knowing you can see exactly what they are doing, the way people become slightly more loving when they are planning to leave. Inside, I felt completely different. I felt calm, a deep, unusual calm. The kind that comes when you have stopped waiting and started moving, when you know exactly what is coming and you are simply watching the clock count down. I had made my decisions. I had taken my steps. There was nothing left to do but wait. I moved my personal funds out of the joint account 5 days before Jeremy left. My salary, my savings, everything that was legally mine. I moved it all into a personal account in my name only. 1 phone call, 20 minutes, done. I called the card issuer for Jeremy's corporate card. I had always managed that account. I told them the card had been lost and needed to be frozen. They froze it. No questions. 10 minutes. When I was done, the joint account had $942 in it. His regular business expenses for the month. Nothing else. I want to be clear about something. Sarah had reviewed everything. Every single account I moved money from was legally mine. I did not take anything that belonged to him. I simply stopped making my money available to him. There is a significant difference. Everything I did was legal, documented and reviewed by my attorney. I want that to be absolutely clear. The nights were the hardest part, not the evenings. The evenings I could manage. I could sit across from him at the kitchen table and keep my face still and say the right things and ask the right questions. I had been practicing that for months already. I was very good at it by then. It was the nights, lying in the dark beside him, listening to him breathe, watching the ceiling and thinking about everything that was about to change, about the 9 years behind us, about the house we were lying in that I had spent 8 months restoring, about Rose in her pale blue dress at our wedding, about the man who had brought sunflowers on a first date and paid attention to the small things. I am not a person who lies awake easily. I have always slept well, even during stressful periods, even during the worst months of building the firm. Sleep had always been the one place I could go where nothing could follow me. During those 2 weeks, sleep would not come. I would lie there for hours listening to Jeremy sleeping beside me, easy and deep the way he always slept, and I would feel something close to fury at how effortlessly he could close his eyes while the world he had built on lies was ticking around him like something about to go off. One night, I got up at 3 a.m. I walked through the house in the dark. I walked through the living room we had furnished together. I walked through the kitchen. I walked through the hallway lined with 9 years of photographs. I stood at the back door and looked out at the garden. The fairy lights we had strung along the fence were off. The roses I had planted the spring before were just shapes in the darkness. I stood there for a long time thinking about Rose. I thought about what she would say if she could see me standing in my kitchen at 3 a.m. I think she would have smiled. I think she would have recognized something in it. That specific feeling of knowing something nobody else knows yet, of having done the quiet work that nobody sees, of waiting. Rose had always been good at waiting. The evenings were their own kind of hard. One evening, Jeremy cooked dinner. He made pasta, which he did sometimes on weekends. He opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving. He lit the candles on the kitchen table. He said, "I feel like we haven't had a proper dinner together in a while." I said, "You're right. We ate by candlelight." He told me about a project he was working on. I listened. I nodded. I asked questions. I was so still inside, so completely still. Yeah, I remember looking at him across those candles and thinking, you lit these for me because you feel guilty. You made dinner and opened wine and lit candles because somewhere underneath all of this, you know what you are doing is wrong. And this is the closest you can come to apologizing for something you have no intention of stopping. I smiled at him. I said the pasta was delicious. He looked so relieved. Another evening, he suggested we watch a film together, something we had been meaning to watch for months. We sat on the sofa the way we used to. He put his arm around me. I let him. I sat there and felt his arm around me and thought, in less than 2 weeks, this will all be over. He does not know that yet, but I do. There was one moment when I almost said something. We were getting ready for bed, and he was standing at the bathroom mirror, and he looked at me in the reflection and said, "You okay?" Not the casual kind, the real kind. The kind where someone is actually looking at you. I looked back at him in that mirror, and for 1 second I felt the full weight of everything I was carrying. Everything I knew. Everything that was about to happen. I said, "I'm fine, just tired." He nodded. He went back to what he was doing. And I stood there and I thought, that is the last time you will ever look at me like that. The last time you will ever see me and wonder if I'm okay, because after this, everything will be different, and you will spend a long time understanding why. And I would sit there during those evenings and I would think, he has no idea. He has absolutely no idea. He thinks he is going to Miami with her for 5 nights on our anniversary. He thinks he has planned everything perfectly. He does not know that the hotel he booked is the hotel I own. He does not know that I have already spoken with the general manager. He does not know that everything he thinks he has planned is already being undone. I would look at him sitting there in our kitchen and I would think all of that. And then I would say, "How was your day?" And he would say, "Busy but good." And I would nod and say, "That's good." On April 25th, he told me about the Dallas conference. He said it so easily, the whole story smooth and ready. He said, "I know it's our anniversary week. I'm sorry." He said, "I'll make it up to you when I get back, I promise." I said, "Of course. Don't worry about it." He looked at me for just a moment. Something moved across his face, a flicker of something. Then it passed. He smiled. He kissed me on the cheek. He went upstairs to pack. I stood in the kitchen and listened to him packing, the drawers opening, the wardrobe, the zip of his good suitcase, the one we had bought together at a luggage store on Fifth Avenue in New York the year before we got married. I had been so happy that day. I remember thinking we were the kind of couple who bought luggage together for adventures they had not taken yet. I thought of Rose. I thought of her pale blue dress. I thought of her hands holding my face at our wedding. He had better deserve you. He left at 7 in the morning. He came downstairs with his suitcase and his laptop bag. He was wearing the navy jacket I had bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. He looked good. He always looked good when he was trying. He hugged me at the front door. He smelled like the same cologne he had worn for 10 years. Not the new one, the old one, the one he wore for me. I stood very still and let him hug me. I said, "Have a good trip." He said, "I'll call you tonight." He did not call me that night. Dana came to the studio that afternoon. She took the whole afternoon off work to be with me. We sat at the big table with my design samples spread around us, and we drank coffee and we waited. We talked about other things. Dana's sister, a project I was working on, a restaurant we had both been meaning to try. But underneath everything, we were both watching the clock. The Royal Meridian Miami check-in time is 3 p.m. At 3:17, my phone buzzed on the table. A text from Victor Webb, 2 words, "They're here." I showed Dana the message. She reached across the table and took my hand. I texted Victor back, 1 word, "Proceed." Victor called me the next morning and told me everything. They checked in together that afternoon, Jeremy and Kara. He had his hand on the small of her back when they walked in. The front desk agent processed their check-in smoothly, gave them their key cards, sent them to the suite on the 14th floor. Normal. Completely normal. Jeremy had no reason to think anything at all was wrong. They spent the afternoon in the suite. They came down for dinner at the hotel restaurant at 7. Victor had arranged for them to have a table by the window. A good table. Very visible. They had drinks. They ordered. They were halfway through their main course when Victor approached the table himself. He introduced himself as the general manager. He was calm. He was professional. He was very clear. He said, "Mr. Reeves, I apologize for the interruption. I need to inform you that there has been a problem with your reservation. The suite you are currently occupying has been reserved for a corporate board event beginning tomorrow morning. Your booking was made in error against blocked inventory, and unfortunately, we cannot accommodate you for the remainder of your stay." Jeremy stared at him. He said, "What? I have a confirmed reservation. What do you mean you cannot accommodate us?" Victor said, "I understand completely, Mr. Reeves, and I sincerely apologize. I should also let you know that the corporate card on the reservation has been flagged. Our billing team tried to process the nightly rate this afternoon, and the card was declined." Jeremy's face changed. Victor said he watched it happen, the confusion first, then the irritation, and then something else entirely. The beginning of understanding. The slow realization that something was happening that he had not planned for. The restaurant had gone very quiet around them. The table to their left, the table to their right. Victor said the whole room had developed that specific silence of people trying very hard to appear as though they are not listening to every single word. Kara was sitting completely still across from him. She had not touched her wine glass since Victor arrived. She said nothing. She just sat there. Jeremy pulled out his personal card, the one linked to our joint account. Victor processed it at the table. He looked at the screen. He said, "I'm afraid this card has also been declined, Mr. Reeves. Insufficient funds." Jeremy looked at the card. Then he looked at Victor. Then he looked at Kara. Something was moving behind his eyes. Victor could see it. The calculation happening. The pieces coming together. Kara picked up her handbag. She paid for their dinners on her own card. She did not look at Jeremy while she did it. Not once. They were escorted from the Royal Meridian Miami at 8:15 that evening, a Tuesday night, our anniversary. Victor said Jeremy was very quiet as they left, not shouting, not arguing, just very quiet. The quiet of someone whose mind is working very fast and not liking what it is finding. Jeremy called me at 8:47 that night. I was on the back porch with Dana and a bottle of wine. I had been waiting for this phone call for 2 weeks. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. He said, "Natalie." His voice was tight, controlled. The voice of a man trying very hard to hold everything together. I said, "Jeremy, how's Dallas?" There was a long silence, long enough that I could hear him breathing, long enough that I could picture exactly where he was standing, outside the Royal Meridian Miami on Brickell Avenue, his good suitcase beside him. Kara gone. Everything gone. He said, "There is something I need to tell you." I said, "I know where you are, Jeremy. I know who you are with. I know about Kara. I know about the necklace from Tiffany in January. I know about Nashville in October where you met her. And I know about the Royal Meridian Miami. I know it very well, actually. 3 years ago, I invested my grandmother's inheritance into the Meridian Collection Ownership Group. I am on the board. I have known the general manager since last year. The silence that followed was the longest silence of our entire marriage. Dana was looking at me. Her eyes were wide. Her hand was over her mouth. I looked out at the back garden, the lights along the fence, the garden I had planted, our home. He said, "Natalie?" I said, "I think you should go back to your room, Jeremy." "Oh, wait, you don't have one." I ended the call. He came home 2 days later. There was nowhere else to go. I had spent those 2 days crying. I want to be honest about that. I cried more in those 2 days than I had cried in years. Not because I was surprised, I was past surprised, but because it was completely real now. The marriage was over. The man I had loved for 9 years was not who I thought he was. And even though I had known that for months, having it be completely confirmed and finished and real was different. It hurt in a way I had not fully anticipated. I cried for the good years. I cried for the farmhouse wedding and Rose in her pale blue dress. I cried for the Italy trip and getting lost looking for the fishing village. I cried for the house in Myers Park and the 8 months I spent restoring it and the mornings he brought me coffee in my paint clothes. I cried for the man who had brought sunflowers on a first date because he remembered I had mentioned that roses felt formal. I cried for the version of Jeremy I had believed in. The version that may have existed once and then quietly stopped existing while I was not paying attention. And then I stopped. I made coffee, I called Sarah, I went back to work. When Jeremy walked through the front door, I was sitting at the kitchen table, a folder from Sarah in front of me. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had spent 2 days understanding the full weight of what he had done. He sat down across from me without being asked. He said, "Natalie, I'm so sorry." I said, "I know you are." He said, "I don't know how it happened. I don't know how I let it get this far. I love you. I have always loved you. If you would give me a chance to fix this." I slid the folder across the table to him. He looked down at it. He looked back up at me. I said, "Those are divorce papers. Sarah filed them this morning. You will want to get your own attorney before you sign anything." He put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. I watched him and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not triumph, not anger, just a very deep, very quiet sadness. For the years that had been real before they became something else. For the person he had been before he became the person he was. For everything we had built together and everything he had chosen to destroy. I said, Jeremy, I need to say one thing and then I need you to go. The night you bought Kara that necklace and came home and told me you forgot our anniversary, I forgave you. I sat right here at this table and I forgave you without even knowing the full truth of what you had done. That is who I was. And you looked at that person and you chose to keep lying to her. That is who you chose to be. He said nothing. At the front door, he stopped and looked at me one last time. He said, I didn't know about the hotel. I said, I know you didn't. That was the point. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. Sarah was thorough and did not let anything go. The Meridian Collection investment was confirmed as my separate property, funded entirely from inheritance money, never mixed with marital funds, documented clearly from the beginning. Jeremy's attorney raised it once. Sarah put it to rest in one meeting. I kept the house in Myers Park, the 1940s colonial, the house I had spent 8 months restoring. Mine. It had always been mine in the way that things you build with your own hands are always yours, regardless of whose name is on the deed. Jeremy moved into an apartment in South End. I drove past it once by accident about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. A modern building with a glass lobby, clean lines, no history. I looked at it for a moment from the car and then I drove on and I did not feel anything at all about it. I heard through mutual friends that Kara and Jeremy lasted 4 more months after Miami. I heard this incidentally without looking for it. I did not feel anything about that either. Not triumph, not satisfaction. That chapter was completely closed. The first months alone were quiet in a way I had not expected. Not bad quiet, just quiet. The house felt large. My own footsteps felt loud. I would come home from work and stand in the kitchen in the silence and think, this is what it sounds like. This is the sound of your own life. I cooked things Jeremy had never liked. I played music through the whole house at volumes that would have annoyed him. I rearranged the furniture in the living room 3 times in 1 month, each time purely because I wanted to, with no one to consult and no one to negotiate with. Small freedoms. I had not understood how much they mattered until I had them back. I threw myself into work. My firm had its best year ever. 3 new commercial projects, a feature in a design publication out of New York, and a referral from Victor Webb himself. He recommended me to a developer who needed full interior design on a new boutique property in Nashville. A 70-room boutique hotel with a restaurant on the ground floor and a rooftop terrace. I accepted the commission immediately. The Nashville project took 8 months. I was there every other week. I drove the kind of focus into that project that I had not driven into anything since the Myers Park house restoration. Every detail mattered. Every decision was mine. Nobody was waiting for me to come home and explain my choices. The hotel opened in October of the following year. Victor flew up for the opening. He walked through the finished spaces and said, Ms. Reeves, this is exactly right. I said, thank you, Victor. He said Rose would be proud. I had told him about Rose during one of our calls during the project. He had remembered. I stood in the lobby of that Nashville hotel and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt completely like myself. I remember the first morning I woke up in the Myers Park house and felt genuinely okay. Not happy exactly, not fixed, just okay. The absence of dread, the absence of the weight I had been carrying for so long I had stopped noticing it was there. I lay in bed and just noticed the absence. This is what it feels like, I thought. This is what it feels like to wake up in your own life and not be afraid of it. Dana threw me a dinner party the month the divorce was finalized. 12 people in her back garden, fairy lights in the trees. the people who had known and said nothing and waited for me to find my way through. Dana made a toast. She raised her glass and said to Natalie, who always knew exactly what she was doing, even when she was the only one in the room who knew it. I raised my glass. I thought of Rose. I thought of $250,000 quietly invested in a boutique hotel group 3 years ago, while nobody was paying attention. I thought of Victor Webb answering on the second ring. I thought of the text, "They're here." And my reply, "Proceed." It is a Saturday morning now. I am sitting in my studio. I redesigned it after the divorce. White walls, warm oak floors, 2 large windows facing east, a new drawing table I bought myself the day the divorce was finalized. I love Saturday mornings in this studio. The light comes in from the east windows and falls across the oak floor in long, warm stripes. The plants along the windowsill are healthy. The boards on the walls are full of work I am proud of. The coffee is exactly how I like it. These small, specific things. I did not understand how much they mattered until I had to fight for the right to be in a room of my own that felt completely like mine. On my desk, there is a photograph of Rose. She is sitting in her garden, pale blue cardigan, her hands folded in her lap, smiling the way she always smiled when she had figured something out that other people had not figured out yet. I think about her every time I look at that photograph. I think about the 40 years she worked and the money she saved and the quiet way she built something real with her life. I think about the fact that she left it to me, not to us, to me. I think about whether she knew, whether some part of her understood that one day I would need something that was entirely mine, something he did not know about, something he could not take. I do not know the answer to that. I just know that she was right. She was right to leave it to me. She was right about all of it. Rose always said that the best investments are the ones nobody knows you are making. She meant money. She meant patience. She meant the quiet, private work of building something real while the world assumes you are standing still. I think about Jeremy sometimes, not often, but sometimes. I think about the version of him that existed at the beginning, the person who brought sunflowers because he remembered I had mentioned that roses felt formal, the person who stood in the doorway of our half-restored kitchen at 7 in the morning with 2 cups of coffee and told me I was going to make it the most beautiful house in Charlotte. That person was real. I did not imagine him. He existed and I loved him. And then he stopped being that person. Somewhere in the middle of 9 years, he made choices that took him so far from who he was that the man who sat across from me in our kitchen in the last months of the marriage was almost unrecognizable to me. I do not know when it happened. I do not know if even he could tell me. But it happened, and it could not be undone. Some moments take a long time to arrive. You do not know you are working toward them. You do not know that every choice you made, everything you built, every quiet decision you kept to yourself is all moving toward one specific point. A point where everything comes together in a way that no one could have planned. Standing outside the Royal Meridian Miami on a Tuesday night in April with his suitcase and his phone and no room to go back to. That was the moment for Jeremy. Sitting on my back porch with Dana and a glass of wine and 2 words on a phone screen. They're here. That was the moment for me. I think about Rose's money sometimes. $250,000 sitting quietly in a boutique hotel group for 3 years, while my husband drove to work every morning with no idea it existed, while he made his plans and told his lies and felt completely untouchable, while he bought a Tiffany necklace for another woman and apologized for forgetting our anniversary. That money was always there, patient, waiting, the way Rose had always been. My name is Natalie Reeves. I am 36 years old. I am an interior designer, and I own part of a hotel in Miami.